It's Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. What's up, humans? This is Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. Welcome to the show. Wow, so last week's episode was a beast, y'all. I mean, even it's like the deeper you dive into something, it's like harder to actually understand, which kind of is the same situation in what I'm going to talk about today. So we're going to get into talking about whales and recycling again. I do have a recycling episode, but I'm just going to touch on a couple of things here today. But also just kind of wanted to throw out a few things before we get into the minutia of today's episode. But a lot of times when you're watching, everyone's watching like 8 million TV shows, like with streaming. It's so crazy because we used to just be like, everybody knows what they're watching on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday. Like your life was kind of scheduled for you. Everybody had a Reader's Digest, and like you knew that most of the world was watching something when you were watching it. And now everybody's kind of out of order. It's like, did you see this? Are you at this episode yet? No spoilers, right? And so it just makes it more difficult. And you want to have conversations, about these shows with people, but it can be difficult to when maybe they haven't gotten around to it yet. And there's so many options, and it's a good thing. There's more job for actors out there nowadays, which I think is great. But it's also hard to keep up with everything, and we're becoming even more of couch potatoes. If we're not on our phones all the time looking at TikTok, we're also binge watching something else. But I just wanted to say one thing that kind of annoys me. I like to give my opinion sometimes on TV shows and movies that I see and things like that. But I did want to say, I hate when people are cast as dancers when they're not dancers. There are so many dancers who are actors out there. It blows my mind. And you'll always see this in castings, like needing a girl who looks like a ballerina who's super frail and skinny. I'm like, or you can hire a ballet dancer. And they're not all super frail and skinny and anorexic. We as dancers have been really pulling away from, the Diet Coke and cigarette era, and we're really trying to turn things around to have a healthy life and to not starve yourself or be bulimic. So I kind of hate that they're still pushing that trope. So that kind of emotionally bothers me. But also when like literally we were watching this movie that Bill Murray is in, and he points out that the server is a dancer. And I literally said to my husband, I go, that girl's walking funny. And she like walked away and she was kind of hunched, right? A dancer is not going to hunch. They have good posture, And she was just kind of walking funny. And I thought, oh my God, I bet you the directors told her, oh, dancers have this like sway when they walk because they're turned out and they lead with their heels or something. And then so she tried to emulate that. And then he's just like pointing out, he's like, yeah, oh, I could tell she was a ballet dancer. And I'm like, no, this girl's definitely not a ballet dancer. Just cast a real dancer, people. Like, come on, there's plenty of us out there who are talented actors and dancers, both one and the same. And they will put together like full shows on ballet and stuff like that and choose to have a better actor, I guess, than a dancer. What I'm saying is look for it. The same way that we're trying to have multicultural casting and biopic, blind casting, all these things, then do it. Do it. Find the real dancers who are also actors. I promise you they are out there. Also, just kind of along the lines of what I was talking about with all the organic things last week, just wanted to say, I'm always looking at ways to take care of myself and to, we're always thinking about, oh, I want to stay younger and youthful. And I was actually making a joke when I was working simulations as an actor. I work, to help nurses out and things like that. And I go, oh my God, I figured it out. Like, so I'm acting out, like giving birth with this, like, it's a dummy, it's a mannequin, and it simulates giving birth. And so I'm playing the mother, right? And I had this like epiphany. I was like, oh my gosh, like the light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, this is the fountain of youth. Get it? You poke the sack with the amniotic fluid, and then the water comes out. And I'm like, that's the fountain. And then the youth comes out. It's inside of us. It's always been like I felt like I was Dan Brown and Da Vinci Code or something. Especially when things get lost in history and in translation, like in the Bible and things like that. You're just like, maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what they meant all along. And this is just a PSA, but wash your feet. You are on your feet all the time. Scrub those mother effers. Get down there, lift up that butt, maybe get some sugar scrub in there. Feels good too. Get off those dead skin cells. Get a pet egg. I think people think, oh, I'm stepping in the water. And I'm like, no, that's not enough. Like, scrub your feet, scrub your butthole too. Some people forget about that too, I think. That's sad. You really shouldn't. Get down in there. Get it. Get a bidet because you can just attach one to your toilet nowadays, and they are great. Also, I wasn't sure if I mentioned it in my last episode, but just wanted to say witch hazel is great for your face and for any kind of scars, even hemorrhoids. Use it. Witch hazel all the way. It's a good product. Also, I just wanted to say to protect your hearing. So many years I've had to take like hearing tests for my job. And if you work any kind of, sound stage, you're a singer, dancer, you play the guitar, whatever, maybe you're a construction worker, the loud noises, right? You should always get checked out. You go to a concert, wear earplugs. It doesn't like muffle the sound. In fact, it makes it even clearer sometimes. And you can hear things actually better and it's not overwhelming. It kind of, I don't know, narrows the sound that you're listening to, and protects you. Sometimes if I don't, even just putting like a little bit of like tissue, like if I have a piece of tissue, I'll put that in my ear. It's something, right? And I wear earplugs every time I blow dry my hair because blow dryers have extremely high decibels. So get some earplugs, make sure they're clean, they're disposable ones, whatever, or wash your reusable ones. But yeah, wear them. Why not? While you're blow drying your hair and protect yourself. I mean, you're putting that thing right by your eardrum. And once that cilia hair dies, it's gone forever. Like you can't reverse hearing damage. So it's good just to go ahead and take precautions. And your cocktail of the day is the ocean water cocktail. This blue concoction is made up of 1/4 cup coconut water, 1/4 cup pineapple juice, 2 ounces of blue curacao, and 1 ounce of coconut rum. Enjoy! Okay, so let's dredge up the past, y'all. And when I say dredge, I mean let's dredge. What is dredging? Okay, so dredging is the excavation of sediments and disposing of them at a different location. So they do this, they'll grab it from the bottom of rivers, lakes, harbors, whatever. They can rebuild beaches this way. And people started doing this to help large vessels cross in different routes. So if you think of the Suez Canal, that was made through dredging. However, sometimes doing this, so it has its, double-edged sword. It's got good and evil things about it. It's affecting, the ecosystem. So it's affecting the coral reef and the seagrasses and damaging corals. It also is a key food source for certain animals like sea turtles. So a lot of times this has caused major issues, and luckily, you do need federal government permits for these things, and it is very protected at this point. One of those live and learn situations. But yeah, that's just kind of something that happens that helps us, with transport of goods and services, which is great, but it also can mess up our Great Barrier Reefs and can disturb, other sea creatures like crab. And this is also sort of like how the pyramids were built. They, used water and canals and they filtered the water to different levels so that they could float these stones up to each one of those pyramids, right? The great mysteries of the three pyramids. But so many times that we discover an awesome thing that we can do to help humans, we end up hurting our animals in this world. And it got me thinking, I'm like, with all these things that we do with the dredging and making canals, and I'm like, you're opening up portals in a way for animals to move to locations that they might not be used to. And I started, researching because I kept hearing about all of these whales and specifically pilot whales that just kept beaching themselves and being stranded. So, why is this cetacean stranding happening? Especially for the pilot whales, they think that because they are so social, they're so gregarious, that they just follow each other. And it's just that same like the kiwis jumping over the edge of the cliff and the goats and the sheep and the herds, and they just follow. And one could be sick and be like the leader of the pack and then just leading them to the beach, and then they follow. And then it's just hundreds of them doing this. And then by the time they get caught in the current, they can't get themselves off. Now, the fact of the matter is, there's not much you can do, especially if these are like super heavy whales. Once they hit land, they only have a survival of 6 hours. Now, you can keep them wet, and unfortunately, a lot of people forget that they're not. They breathe air, they breathe oxygen. So they can, take salt water through their gills and they can still get water, a different way than we can because they can filter it through their gills. And they get their fresh water from like sea creatures like krill and shrimp. And what's happening is people are covering them to keep them wet until they think help will arrive or that the tide will come in, and they're covering up their blowholes, and you're like, stop it, like that's where they breathe, can't you hear them like pushing the air out of the blowhole? So you have to be careful with that too, and they could actually drown if you give them too much water by their mouth. There are around 2,000 strandings each year worldwide, and there's just not much that people can do because if you try to put them back in the ocean, by that time, sometimes the sharks will swarm. So sometimes the most humane thing that anybody can do is to actually euthanize them while they're on the beach. The most common species are toothed whales. Those are the most commonly affected. Dolphins, porpoises, anything that has teeth, and the ones that are in large groups and social systems. And sometimes it's just a whale's time, or they're going there to die, whether they're having an injury or they're sick or there's some other weakness. Obviously tides, and sometimes they do not mean to be there because the tides are changing. Or maybe they're running away from an orca chasing it. Oftentimes, orcas do like to jump up onto the beach and wait for the water to bring them back in so they can try to get seals and other types of food. They will chase dolphins onto the shore as well. Now, there are phone numbers that you can call. So if you do live near the ocean, it might be worth it for you to jot that down and put it in your phone. But they do have wildlife alert hotlines. They have a Southeast region stranding network, and that way they can come out and possibly tow the creature back into the ocean depending on the situation. And that number is 877 whale help. So if you decipher that, that's 1-877-942-5343. So I added that to my phone because you just never know. People have also been hypothesizing that the change in water temperature has something to do with it, where they're normally getting their food, and where they would normally travel is changing, and then they simply just get lost. Another reason that animals can get lost, which this one is the one that I'm like, oh, we actually can control this. So, and it comes down to war, which I freaking hate war, because if you even watch any of the older movies, anything at all, anything in history, it all literally starts and ends in a conversation, and it just seems so silly to me. It's so dumb to me. Like, how do you really pick, okay, well, we won this war because we had one man more than you that survived the fight. We won, so now we get to decide what goes on here. Like, I don't know. I understand like protecting your land and things like this, and we need to protect ourselves, but echolocation. Now, because of the Navy and the submarines, and when they are using their sonar technology down there, they're actually confusing the animals. Some of them actually hemorrhaging or causing decompression sickness, and they can get these like gas bubble lesions. And sometimes they will rapidly change their depth because of what they're hearing, and then all of a sudden they're bleeding from their eyes and their ears. And they'll experience temporary deafness. Now, there has been laws put in place, and there are people fighting for this. We did have one law that was like, oh, well, we can have up to this amount of decibels of frequencies under the ocean. But we're trying to get to the point where we don't have any of that, because it literally is confusing them. And some of them are killing themselves because they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Is this a warning sign? Like, I don't know what's happening, which is just so sad and terrifying. Like that we found a way to like mess with our marine animals in such a specific way. So for now, the Supreme Court ruled that the Navy can be allowed to use these frequencies, but environmental groups are still fighting against it. But unless you know how long a beached whale has been beached, I would say to stay away because they do build up gas. They can often explode. They get dehydrated and they will explode and they will emit really toxic gases. So, better just to stay away and call the correct numbers, especially if you see that it's already on its way out. This is also not the time to have a feast and be like, cool, I didn't have to kill it because it can be extremely dangerous and you can develop stuff like botulism and just having terrible sickness. It is really sad how quickly they deteriorate when they are out of their environment. Their skin, they just get so dehydrated. And honestly, they can't even support their own weight. Like their organs just begin to collapse by not being buoyant in the water. Now, one repurposing, which is kind of sad, but it could live on forever. If you've ever seen the Maui hook from Moana, or properly called the Macau, my husband wears one. I have one as well. Well, all of these whales are actually coming to the shores of New Zealand. So the Maori people, the indigenous people there, are actually allowed, and it's customary for them to use whalebone for those necklaces. And because it's dead, they allow them. So they allow them to go there and they do it very spiritually. And they have, very high respect for these animals. So, in a way, they get to be repurposed in a beautiful way. So, I do like that part and that they are using this as like sacred ground or what they call tapu. And if the whales do die in the ocean, nature takes its course and we watch the circle of life and they will get gaseous, they will float to the top. Scavengers will come to eat them, and eventually the carcass will just fall to the bottom, and that's known as whale fall. Now, just some fun facts. How do whales sleep? Now, some sleep like vertically, which is called logging because they just look like they're floating logs in there. But half of their brain is awake and they actually don't sleep very long. They sleep very short amount of times. Like their 7% of their day is sleeping. That's it. So they do short, little, quick micro naps basically throughout the day. And apparently, that makes sperm whales the species that needs the least amount of sleep on the entire planet. And giraffes are a close second. And if you're a crazy koala, you need 18 to 22 hours of sleep. On the flip side. Now, if you've ever been to SeaWorld, you don't need me to tell you that orca whales are extremely intelligent animals and social animals. They rely on the cooperation of their team to hunt and survive, and they do exhibit emotions and pain. This is something people, especially with so many different animals, are trying to discover like, do they grieve the loss of other animals? And we've proven that they can. Now, orca whales also are unlikely to attack humans, even though they are called killer whales. They're still wild animals. There have been stories of a group of orca whales who have saved a human when they were in danger of a shark attack. So sometimes they will go out of their way to be like, I am the king of this jungle and I see danger for this person and I will help it. Now, while whales will be half awake and their mind is working, they do sleep near the surface so they can get their oxygen, but they can also hold their breath for about 60 minutes. The sperm whale can hold its breath longer, so they can hold it for about 90 minutes. And then there's a whale called the curved beak whale, and they can take long dives underwater for 138 minutes. Whoa, guys, whoa. Then there's me who can do like 1 minute and 30 seconds. Yeah, I need to work on that. Whales also can go pretty deep. So the deepest recorded dive was 2,992 meters. A normal depth would be about 2,000 meters for sperm whales. I also thought it was interesting, many of the whales, they move to warm waters to mate and to give birth in the winter. And then in the colder waters in the summer, that's where they have more of an abundance of food. So with this global warming stuff, you wonder, is that affecting those normal patterns for them? It seems like these whales are having these navigational mistakes, but why? So I know scientists are looking into it. We had the 477 pilot whales that just washed up in New Zealand. Then we had 230 whales found in Tasmania, and it's just happening all over the world. And that's why I bring up the dredging, because if they are getting confused by the coastline being different, it can disorient them. Also, what are the nicest sea creatures out there, our sea mammal friends? Everybody always looks at dolphins because they have these natural smiles on their face. But I would like to say that dolphins actually aren't as nice as they are cracked up to be. They have been noted to help people, but they've also been noted to hump people. And I'm pretty sure Demi Moore had an encounter like that, and probably a lot of tourists. But they have been known to kill their own babies. We know that lions do this in the wild to make females immediately ready for the next pregnancy. And so maybe that's the case with the dolphins as well. Maybe it's a survival of the fittest, and they're like, this baby's not strong enough. Let me have you make another one. And on that note, dolphins are known to gang up on women and rape them and keep them in line for weeks at a time to try to impregnate them. They also can stay awake for like 5 days straight, so maybe they're just grumpy. Granted, I did read that they don't really lose any of their mental acuity, so. But in general, whales seem to be pretty friendly. They're known as being pretty docile. They say humpback whales, beluga whales, gray whales, blue whales are typically just curious and friendly creatures. Now, another thing I'd like to touch on before we wrap up is the plastic crisis. Now, we do everything that we can. I did a whole episode on recycling, and it's still unclear what goes on there because even the countries are not following the proper laws, and the facilities are not working hard enough to make sure that the trash does not get out into our environment. Even when they transport it on trucks and trains, they're not making sure that everything is wrapped in there safely, and birds will fly above it and grab it and put it into the wild. A lot of plastics that we think can be recycled cannot be recycled. So we're putting it in our bin thinking it's going to get recycled, and then it's not. And then we have the factories that melt down the plastics and then put that into our environment. Now, that doesn't mean stop recycling because it's just going to go into our landfill anyways, because we are fighting to make sure that we are separating and using and reusing these plastics. And there are people fighting to make sure that the practices that we're doing get utilized properly. But even things like our hand or facial soaps, even cigarette butts have microplastics in there, and people think it's paper. Oh, it'll be fine in the sand, but it's actually really bad. And I realized my facial soap has microbeads in it. And those beads are so small, it's hard to filter them out of our water. You'll notice a lot of the bins on the beach sometimes are open to the air. So obviously, birds can just fly in there. So they've been being better about putting tops on these. So if you ever see a bin that looks like it's overflowing, maybe don't add to it. Make sure that the lid is closed tightly so that we can protect our beaches and our oceans. And believe it or not, there's even microfibers in our clothing. So when you're washing your clothes, it can shed and then it goes through the machine, and the little tiny microbeads get into our water. It's terribly sad when you see these photos of, a clam or whatever using a cup as its new shell, a hermit crab, whatever it is, and then we've got the nets that the fishermen just leave behind, birds wrapped in plastic. And then, of course, the amount of plastic we've actually found in human blood. Yay, it's in us, in our heart, in our arteries. It's in humans now. Tons, obviously, because we know better, so we have smaller traces of it, but the animals don't. They're like, what is this? And they're just eating it. And you'll find, dead sperm whales with 13 pounds of plastic in its stomach, or 115 plastic cups in their stomachs. And while the invention of plastic has been amazing for the medical industry and other things, it's really not necessary for us to be using that in our daily lives, like going to the grocery store, because we can use reusable bags. We have survived before without plastic bags or disposable plates and cutlery. Now, one awesome thing that I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And I know some people are like, oh, but it's going to be dirty. I'm like, whatever. We all go out to fine dining. We reuse plates all of the time. This is not going to be a new concept. But kind of like when you go to the movie theater and you dispose of your 3D glasses, same thing. So instead of like having plastic cutlery and you're like, I'm done with that, let me throw it in the trash, and just building and building trash, you put it in a bin to be rewashed and then used by someone else again. So just like school trays, right? Don't let them be disposable. We reuse those trays. So when we're serving our food, if it's, going to any kind of dine-in, sit down, I know that to go, we probably can't do that, but we can use paper products instead of plastic products. So I think going back to using a sturdy cardboard or paper is going to be better for biodegradability in our environment, and just reusing plastic. or stainless steel or whatever will last longer, and save budget wise for these companies, because obviously it always comes down to overhead and money, right? Also, I need to be better about this, not buying tons of water bottles. You can easily reuse and refill. So we definitely all need to be better about that. I've got 8,000 thermoses and I should definitely use that more often. And people are getting better about straws. There's, new inventive like bamboo, agave candy, cutlery as well. So we're just getting better at finding alternatives to plastic. They also recommend considering products that are made of ocean bound plastic. Wear fewer synthetic clothes, choose natural fibers when you can, and volunteer. Be part of the cleanup crew. Be part of saving our ocean. There is a huge company that is working that they are actually creating these giant net barriers to collect all of the garbage. And there's actually a Great Pacific Garbage Patch, guys. It is thousands of kilograms of plastic in the middle of the ocean between Hawaii and California. And these people are helping. It's called the oceancleanup.com, so you can get more information about that. And also trying to clean out our rivers as well. And just to give you an idea, that's about 810 football fields. And it's getting there through our rivers. So they are the main source of the ocean plastic pollution. So what they do is they create this interceptor barrier. So it's like a standalone floating barrier. And it's anchored in a U shape around the mouth of a small river. So that intercepts the trash and it acts as a buffer, and then it's removed from the water. They also have interceptor tenders and interceptor barricades. Advocates are working on a treaty with the United Nations, and they will be finalizing it by the end of 2024. And I'm hoping that people really think about this treaty. I have heard that countries are coming around to the idea because over 75% of the accumulated plastic in the ocean is mismanaged waste, and that's coming from the Asian countries. So that's coming from Malaysia and China and Vietnam and Thailand and India. And everyone really needs to just take it more seriously. I mean, it builds up so quick. Our population is growing exponentially. And so with more people, there's more waste. And we have to think about our environment, because it will eventually affect us and our health as well, and the future health of our kids. Putting plastic toxins into the environment is what creates crazy things like acid rain. And these little particles really are coming into our bodies, our lungs, our blood. And we are going to be fighting for that in this treaty to get away from those microplastics, anything that's basically under 5 millimeters. If we're going to keep plastics, reusing is the way to go. Instead of having it be a rubbish bin, it will be a reuse bin. And we can just wash those, give those to the companies, and put them back into circulation. We would need major infrastructure changes and investments, but I do think that we could find private funders and companies to contribute to this. Of all of the, you know, rich people out there that donate to things, I think this is an important thing to be a part of to change. We also have to change our personal habits as consumers, but I think that we can get there. This means that corporations need to use fewer types of polymers. And we also need to label better, because we shouldn't have to like research how to recycle something. It should say on the label. And in my episode, we know that the recycling little triangle, 1 and 2, are the best for recycling, and number 5. But there are certain ones, certain factories that don't even take number 5s. So anything above a number 5 is typically not recyclable. Even the color of a bottle can change if it's recyclable or not. Like a green bottle might not be, but a clear bottle would be. I do hope that the treaty protects us and that we get to the point where everything is globally mandated. Another thing you can do with old shirts, rags, towels that you're like, oh, they have stains on them, I'm just going to get some new ones, you can donate those to your local SPCA or animal shelter. Don't forget, there are also styrofoam and grocery bag recycling bins, usually at your local Publix or grocery store. People are trying to get better about downcycling, which is melting down grocery bags and degrading it. And sometimes they can turn those into picnic tables and asphalt. Greenpeace has reported that most recycling places will accept a 1, a 2, and a 5. And that 5 container is made of that polypropylene. But nobody accepts plastic cutlery, straws, or stirrers. So just don't put them in your recycling bin. And in fact, anything that is small, like that could go into an animal's nose, like a sea turtle, try to wrap them all together and put them in one container when you're throwing it away. The good news is Americans do recycle 97% of their cardboard boxes. Make sure they are not contaminated pizza boxes, though. We want to keep them clean. 50% of aluminum cans and 31% of glass containers. Also, if you care about drilling for oil, we also use crude oil while it's not the main substance, but for making plastics. Whoosh. Well, I hope you learned something because I definitely learned something today and this week and doing my research. And I will check back in the end of 2024 and see how far we've come with this treaty and see if we will have any big changes in our world. In the meantime, don't be a litter bug. Do your best. I even picked up litter the other day, even though it wasn't mine. Of course, I was safe when I picked it up, but every little bit makes a difference, and we've proven that through our conservation programs. If I'm one person and you're one person and another person is one person, you might feel like your one little duty didn't do much for the day, but we are billions of people, so if we each contribute and help out the best that we can, if you see something, fix it, pick it up, put it in the trash can, help conserve and save our oceans. Thank you guys for joining me today. This has been Katie Rose, Served Straight Up with a Twist.